Kate Bush. Now, we're going on to our world premiere part of Pellicroco Platters, because Simon Wells, one of the things you've done, one of the many things you've done, is you didn't meet, actually, sorry, you wrote a book on Charles Manson.
Indeed I did.
And we're going to play some of his music in a little while. But prior to playing that, how did you get involved? Well, not get involved, that sounds wrong. How did you become interested or end up writing a book on Charles Manson?
I mean, it's a question I've been asked many, many times, and I will always say anyone who's a student of the 60s will come across Charles Manson. I mean, it's...
Because it was when the 60s kind of went wrong a little bit, wasn't it?
It certainly was, I think.
The end of the 60s dream.
The end of the 60s dream, as the 60s is largely mythology, and Manson really plays into that, you know.
So the setting was Hollywood, the valleys and the big farms.
Beverly Hills in August 1969.
And there was a lot of hippie communes around that way.
Topanga Canyon and Laurel Canyon were the big hippie hangouts. But, you know, I mean, I think Manson was a little bit outside of there, but he was a familiar face around there, you know.
And before he did what he did, he used to frequent many of the parties around that way and hang out with certain people. I mean, I know he was famously friends with one of the Beach Boys.
Dennis Wilson, yeah. Manson's role in Hollywood and in the music industry has never really been properly ascertained. The reason for that is that many people were involved with him prior to the murders, many prominent people, and certainly when I was writing the book, I was warned off on certain occasions that certain people would not be happy to be known that they were actually frequenting.
Well, when you say warned off, what, you received emails or phone calls or
made phone calls and warned off, yeah.
Really? Oh.
Basic and emails as well. And
what, because people were scared of some sort of association, or?
Yeah, I mean, he was a known face around Hollywood. He was a musician of some note, and certainly he courted the interest of certain studios and certain people, and was seriously considered for a record contract at some point, to the point of doing demos, which I brought along today. But everything's clouded by the horror that happened afterwards.
So were you actually approached to do a book on him, or you put it forward? Yeah,
it was my idea. I wanted to rationalise the landscape of it, because my own feeling was that Manson fell into the... there was a massive movement towards the end of the 1960s. The hippies had become so powerful, and Timothy Leary was threatening to stand as governor of California. I think Manson, certainly not by design, but I think he just fell into the authorities wanted to have a bogeyman to say this is what happens if you become a hippie, and he fell into that. So he's certainly not innocent of conspiracy to murder, and certainly orchestrating murder, but he didn't take part in any murders, and most people reference him as a mass murderer and a serial killer, where he wasn't. He was a screwed up guy who had influence over very young people, and the madness that occurred, which I detailed thoroughly in my book Coming Down Fast, was a reaction to what had gone before, and certainly for those of us who've been involved in the music business and are aware of the media industry, he was sort of pulled along with promises that things were going to happen, and of course nothing did. And then his madness spiraled out of control one night, leading to probably the most famous murders of the 20th century. But the landscape and what caused this had never really been properly explored, and I hope I managed to do that.
So I was under the impression you'd interviewed him, but you didn't, because that's impossible, I suppose.
It's largely impossible since California took out a ruling that, because they started to appear on chat shows by satellite. I think Geraldo and Tom Snyder had Manson live from his prison cell, and it was a major embarrassment. So, right. But people have got through on the telephone. I had sort of thought about doing it, but listening to his interviews, he's pretty crazy. Anyway, I got more from the people around him. So
your book, does it cover him growing up and his, before it all?
Yeah, I mean, I had a pretty rotten childhood, but then so did a lot of people. I think I have too much sympathy for for that. It's people get stronger by it and do great things. And he came out of prison in 1967, and he had some extraordinary songs, which were unlike any other musician around at the time. So heading up to Haight-Ashbury, as he did in March '67, and then down to Los Angeles, he also with his collateral of his retinue of young girls. I mean, he was a pretty extraordinary character, quite unlike anyone else. And the talk then was of peace and love and music, and they were a very peaceful group of people. And Manson was an extraordinary character who said some extraordinary things. But much like the Summer of Love, it came to an end, and he did not get the recording contract, which I'm led to believe he was after. Certainly he did many demo sessions with many famous people, Terry Melcher and Dennis Wilson, not least, Greg Jacobson, another one. And this track, which I brought along today, is his first ever session. And it was held at Gold Star Studios in Hollywood, and they had the good sense to just leave the tape running, and I acquired a copy of this. And the track which I've chosen to play would surprise many people, because firstly, when I heard Charles Manson made music, before I ever investigated, I imagined it would be slasher music, screaming and madness. This is not. This is a beautiful little song. It's called My World.
My world is a sad world. Often wondered if there's blame. Such a fool in a mad, mad world. With no picture in my frame. Everyone says crazy fool. You're always gazing at the night. With my arms around the tree, loving life with all my might. Crazy as I may seem, not knowing what to do, living with one crazy dream in a frantic world of blue. I awake every evening and somehow stumble through the night. Such a fool in a mad world, loving life with all my might. My world is a sad world, often wondered if there's blame. Such a fool in a mad, mad world, with no pictures in my frame. Loving you without a name, with no love, no one to blame.
That was the world premiere on Pellicroco platters of Charles Manson's music, courtesy of Simon Wells, author of a book on Charles Manson called Coming Down Fast. Now, just in case I'm not sure if everyone does know his full story. I mean, obviously everyone's heard of him, but what exactly happened towards the end there was the murders? If you could just explain.
Sure. I mean, he was pretty much a sort of habitual criminal who was in jail most of his life. He had a pretty rotten childhood, but then, you know, many people do and go off do great things. So anyway, he came out of jail aged 32 in 1967 and had heard it was all happening up in Haight-Ashbury, so he went up there. And because he'd been in jail for the past 16 years, pretty much off and on, he just couldn't believe that all the Flower Children and everyone was unconditional love. And because he had a guitar and because he was very sort of charismatic, people followed him, especially young girls. So he collected like a harem of these teenagers, and they all jumped on a bus and they went down to Los Angeles. The idea was for him to realise these dreams of being a music star. Yeah. It wasn't that unusual for people to get on buses and travel around California. That was quite normal at the time.
Merry pranksters.
Yeah, the pranksters did it. That's right. And again, people say, "Oh, you know, Manson did this with a girl." Well, so what? Lots of people were doing it at the time. He scored a few demo sessions in Hollywood. The track you've just heard was the very first one, and people were upbeat about it. And I must say, when I heard it, I thought, "Yeah, that's no different to maybe what." Loving Spoonful, John Sebastian, or Arthur Lee. It's quite similar. It's certainly Promise, and but nothing sort of concrete happened. Then he hooked up with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys and moved into Dennis Wilson's house with his entire collection of girls, which they were called the family.
They were like, "Have you got enough rooms? All right, they'll all muck in together. It's fine."
It really was communal living, and I think Manson, being a prison convict, he knew that if you turn up to someone's house, especially a rock star's house, with 12 willing females, I mean, anything can happen. That again, people were interested in his music, but nothing happened. He then got kicked out of Dennis Wilson's house, and they all lived on a movie set on the outskirts of Los Angeles called Spahns Ranch, a disused
That must
movie
have been
set.
strange.
It's where
Is that where they filmed that documentary?
part
They
of
went
the
back there,
recent
didn't they?
documentary
Yeah.
was. I mean, wherever sort of fantasy and fiction, it all merged together on this disused film set. I mean,
So
you
they were
couldn't
living
dream
on a
of
film
that.
set.
They were living
Amazing.
on a film set. So
Brilliant.
and it was a commune, but so what? There were many communes in California in the 60s, and it was free love and drugs. So what? There was many of those going on. I think people have been at pains to point out how remarkable the Manson family were. No, they weren't. There was loads of them, hundreds of people doing that. Manson was the patriarch of the commune, but then again, so what? There was lots of other people who were head honchos of the commune. So it was nothing extraordinary at all. But the music deal escaped him, and it basically got to the point where Dennis Wilson and another chap called Terry Melcher, they literally backed away. And of course, with the music industry,
What, because they could sense there was something not
they
quite
sensed
right,
there was
or-
something a little bit strange. And also, and it's an interesting point which someone who recorded Manson told me, they said, in fact, if you sat down with Manson around a campfire and all the girls are singing along to his music, it's brilliant. Bounce that down onto tape, it lost so much. There was plans to do a documentary on Manson and the girls in the commune with Manson's music. That was through Terry Melcher, and Dennis Wilson were going to do that, and that fell down as well.
Who's Terry Melcher, by the way?
Terry Melcher was Doris Day's son, and he was producer of the Birds, and
Oh, okay.
I think he might have done some Beach Boys.
Yeah.
He certainly did a lot of
There was
stuff.
a big name out there.
Big noise, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, eventually Melcher went down to the ranch to tell Charlie that there's nothing we
That
can
must
do
have been a
with this.
tough call.
It was. And
Who wants to go and tell him?
Yeah, it
Well,
really
yeah.
was. But the thing I worked out, and I think for those of us who've worked in the industry, that people will always say, "Yeah, that's great, that's fantastic." You
It's
know,
like,
really
oh,
like
Charles,
what
I've
you're
got some
saying.
bad news.
No one was ever prepared to tell him it's not going to happen until the last minute. In the book, I've done a painstaking hour by hour of this final day, which gives. There's no excuse for murder whatsoever, but it certainly shows you what happened. And I called it Coming Down Fast because there's a Beatles song called Helter Skelter, which Manson referenced heavily, and it's just like everything collapsed. His whole musical dreams collapsed. He was also inspired by the Beatles' White Album, and it's here that we go into real left field stuff, which it might make sense if you have taken acid and listened to the Beatles' White Album, which all of them had done. And because he was drawing in these references of an apocalypse that was going to happen whilst listening to the Beatles' White Album. I mean, it's completely bonkers. But the time was the time. People were tuning into those sort of frequencies. And he called this revolution Helter Skelter, where there was a big racial uprising, a big race wars, etc., etc. And anyway, by the August of 1969, that although there'd been student riots and also race riots, there'd been no massive sort of revolution. And he went the day before the murders of Sharon Tate and the other people in Cielo Drive in Beverly Hills. He'd been away to a New Age commune called Esalen in Monterey as a last-ditch attempt to have his music heard, and they'd laughed him out. So he came back raging. He then found that 2 members of his family had been arrested for shoplifting, and also a person who was allied to the family had been murdered, and the police were on the trail. So it was all coming down fast, and he then said to these people, go to this house on Cielo Drive, which
Was there any reason, why he chose that house?
it was the house of Terry Melcher.
Oh, I see.
So Terry Melcher had moved on,
Oh, I see.
and Manson knew this, but I strongly believe that Manson, who was appeared to be very keen on getting this message out to the world, he wanted to choose a celebrity house for this act to happen, just to prove to his followers that it was part of a big thing, part of the revolution, because when they went there they daubed revolutionary signs around the place. I mean, it's just so crazy. But what actually brought it together is not that not in the scheme of such things, it's not that extraordinary. I checked the murder figures for California since 1969, and they're nothing less than shocking. 3 a day, people die. The reason we talk about this is because, 1, it was Beverly Hills, and 2, because there was the actress Sharon Tate. Without any disrespect to Sharon Tate, unfortunately her celebrity made the crime a celebrity crime. Take Sharon Tate out of the equation, it's a series of murders which happens in LA every day, as regrettable and horrible as it is.
And where is Charles Manson now? Obviously he's in prison.
High security in California.
And he's never coming out?
No, and I mean, there's many people out there who have taken, as I have tried to do, taken a very sober approach to this this case. And it is a man charged of 9 counts of first-degree murder who wasn't present, certainly for 8 of them. I feel that he fell into the prosecution certainly wanted to make him out as a hippie cult leader. I think if he presented himself a bit better in court and perhaps possibly got some better legal representation, he might have got away with maybe a conspiracy to murder charge. But he became the bogeyman, and in some ways his celebrity has been assured by that. And it would say to me that if he desperately wanted some sort of celebrity, he got it, but perhaps in a way, in a way that he hadn't originally imagined. But the reason we're talking about him today is the fact he is a celebrity.
So, a couple of things then. The documentary, what was the name of that documentary?
It's called Manson. And it was...
were you involved on that?
Yeah, it was a slight consultancy basically. I had some stuff on that. I mean, it was a... the problem I have with this, and I will say with all of the things that I've been approached over Manson, they want to... The prosecutor of the Manson case, a chap called Vincent Bugliosi, wrote a very, very good account of the trials called Helter Skelter. But it was all seeing, as I've been saying to you earlier, all the things that happened to Manson prior to the murders were fairly atypical to most of the 60s counterculture in California. I mean, you had Timothy Leary, for instance, saying the Beatles were divine avatars, and you had people also in America saying Paul McCartney's dead because if you look at the record cover, he's walking backwards, or smoke the album cover, you get told. I mean, all this stuff. So it wasn't that unusual. But as I say, the murders were absolutely horrendous, and but they came out really. If one looks at the book, it really was just it just went one night. It went crazy, and there was other stuff as well, which I found in the book that Manson sent some people over to England during the 60s, which again is no one's looked at that before properly, and there was a death in London which was very, very suspicious, which a person connected to the Manson family, but it's not all that it seems. So your book is called Coming Down Fast, Charles Manson.
You can get it
anywhere. Should be in any bookshop. It's all ordered on Amazon if you want it.
Okay, well, we've only got 10 more minutes or so left, so what, are you going to play another song for us now to...
Yeah, I think we'll calm it all
move
down
on from Charles Manson.
Calm down a bit. I mean, it's. I must say that I'm not an apologist for Charles Manson in any way, but I like demystifying.
You're painting the full picture.
Yeah, and I think it all gets very hysterical. And as I say, the reality of Charles Manson is really of. If you take the celebrity element out of it, you wouldn't know about him. There's many people in California in jails guilty of drug-related murders. But as I say, it was a very difficult thing to write because obviously I had to cover the murders in great depth, and a lot of people said to me, "How did you go with it?" And speaking to people who'd been affected directly about it, it was a terribly upsetting.
Did you go out there, by the way?
I didn't. I only had 11 months to write it, and thankfully with the internet and telephone, I'm able to speak to many people. But are
you not intrigued to go out there where it all happened?
I think I will pop out at some point. I think it's the darkness that's associated with it, and it's very difficult when you read the book at the beginning. It's a joyous hippie commune that went down.
Is it still there, that film set?
The film set got burnt down, but the actual existing location's very much still there. And the Sharon Tate's house where all the murders happened, the guy who owns it has got so fed up with people turning up, he knocked the house down, just knocked it down. But as I say, I think maybe to calm it all down a bit, there's a piece of classical music which I think is extraordinarily contemporary, even though it was written back in the early part of the 20th century, and it's absolutely mind-blowing still all those years on. Many people reference it. It's written by Eric Satie, and it's the third piece of his Gymnopédie series.